When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and claim the potential inside of you, you're in the right place. Welcome back to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter. As a transformation coach and breathwork facilitator, I'm invested in making the dynamic landscape of personal evolution accessible. My goal is to inspire you to take action for yourself because you have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to transform your life and share the stories of practitioners who are doing the work so that you feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. What a great episode I have for you today as far as the intro goes, capacity to evolve and bringing your intentions and dreams into the world. And today I really have a wonderful story of a practitioner who's doing that. My friend and podcast brother from another mother, Cam Leids, who is an entrepreneur, psychonaut, and host of the Tripsitting Podcast. He also writes the Tripsitting blog and writes for Shroomtown, another blog in the psychedelic space. And this episode was just a delight. Cam and I have become friends. I was on his podcast a while back, and so it just felt great to have him on and continue to explore some of the curiosities I had about his own journey, and something that had come up on his podcast, the suggestion to read the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, and how that book started to show up in my life in these different ways until I really couldn't ignore it. So I wanted to dig into Cam's adventure and how he discovered that book. And what I got was this wonderful conversation on his integration for an ayahuasca retreat about a year ago, and how the Untethered Soul fit into that. And also how Cam's learning not to take life so seriously. This delicate dance that we talk about a bit in the episode between effort and effortlessness, and finding authenticity and joy and, dare I say, fun in the journey that we're on. And there's this wonderful dance, like I said, between effort and effortlessness. Cam shares about how meditation has been such a vital point to his own evolution and growth. And so before we jump into the episode, I just want to mention that I also agree meditation has been such a vital point to my journey and what I do and being able to step into this work. And in the last few years, one of the methods that I've practiced is an active form of meditation in the way of breathwork, neurodynamic breathwork, and creating my own container of breathwork for transformation that combines somatic meditation and awareness, the neurodynamic breathwork, as well as integration together into this beautiful curated deep dive journey. And I'm doing a free breathwork workshop coming up on November 19th. I'd love to have you there, whether you're a beginner to breathwork or looking to get more experience and resources. Breathwork for transformation can be a method you can rely on that can really support you in your own growth, your own inner exploration, and is really a wonderful introduction into the world of meditation. There's something about the breathwork experience that can really help you drop into a kind of inner stillness and presence with your inner intelligence that is pretty profound. And I don't think anyone forgets that first breathwork experience. So I'd love to have you join me at the free workshop I'm doing on November 19th, which is a Sunday. You can find the link to sign up on the show page wherever you're listening or watching this episode, or go to lu.ma/Blue Magic Alchemy and look for the free workshop on November 19th. That's lu.ma/Blue Magic Alchemy for the free breathwork workshop I'm holding on November 19th. I hope to see you there. Here's the episode with Cam Leids. All right, Cam Leids, welcome to the Vital Point podcast. So wonderful to be able to return the podcasting favor here.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So just sometimes we have the practice at the end of the show. But when I was on your podcast, the Tripsitting Podcast, which everybody should check out, definitely, we kind of opened with a little bit of a practice. And even though it was more to prime us, I think, it was a really nice way to drop in and kind of co-regulate. And so I'm wondering if you'd like to offer something so that we can all collectively, you, I, and the audience can all just kind of get on the same wavelength.
Yeah, I'd love to, and we'll just dive right in. So I invite you and anybody listening to close your eyes. Unless you're listening to this while driving, then please don't. But close your eyes and start to focus on the breath. And simply just notice the breath. Don't try to change it in any way. Just notice how you breathe in and then breathe out. And as you notice that, start to notice if there are any thoughts or feelings that are coming up for you. Notice any sensations that you might have in the body. Try not to focus or dwell on them too much. Simply just notice that they're there and then let them go and move on to the next one. Now I invite you to take a few intentional deep breaths in. So we'll start in through the nose and hold at the top. And release fully. We'll do another one of those. And release. Now just get back to noticing the breath as it goes in and out without trying to change it or regulate it in any way. The reason we do this meditation is just to get ourselves grounded and feeling into the present moment and understand that this is a safe space to think and feel and say what we want without fear of judgment. Not to be thinking about the future, what we're going to say or do. Just to focus on this moment. And this is where I would invite everybody to maybe set an intention for what you are hoping to get out of this podcast and what you want to feel. And I like to share my intention with my guest, and it's usually always the same intention, at least at this point. But my intention is to fuck around and have fun. We'll do one more deep breath in and release fully. And that concludes our meditation.
All right. Thanks, Cam. That's wonderful. Let's fuck around and have fun.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I met Cam through the interwebs. I started noticing his excellent podcast, and also the fact that, you know, sometimes it seems like there's so many people in the psychedelic space. I mean, we were both just in Denver for the MAPS conference, right? 12,000 people inside. And I have a feeling there was like a lot more people that didn't make it inside. There was something that told me that there was some sort of like Grateful Dead-esque scene happening outside of the conference. I had a friend that came from Tucson and literally like got in Friday Friday afternoon because somebody else was leaving and they gave him the pass.
No way.
But like literally drove from Tucson to hang out outside the conference and network. So I'm like, okay, if that's one person, there's probably like a ton of people that are doing that.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, the psychedelic space is still kind of small and intimate, and it's easy to get to know the same people. And I think that's where I started noticing you, was like, oh, wait, I know that person. I know that person. I know that person that's been on your podcast, or, you know, oh, they've been on my podcast too. And so finally it was like, just seemed right to reach out and be like, hey man, what's up?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like how it actually even started it. I mean, typically like once I start talking to people and getting to know, it's either like I respond to something on their stories or they respond to something on my stories. And then one of us will be like, hey, like, you know, I like your stuff. Like, you know, would love to actually, you know, have like a conversation and get to know you a little bit more personally. And then it just goes somewhere from there, regardless of where that is. But yeah, it is interesting. It does feel like, you know, it feels big, but it also does feel really, really small at the same time. Cause it seems like, especially I think the people that are on the podcasts and, you know, whether they're guests or have their own podcasts, all end up kind of knowing the same people. And, you know, a lot of us like to interview the same people because they're really good guests and they're really good speakers and they have a lot of knowledge. So, you know, we all want a little bit of that for ourselves. And I think we start to take notice of that from other people.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So how was your conference experience as far as like the podcast? I know for me, I ended up meeting a bunch of people that I'm like, I feel like I do know you because we've had like a 2-hour conversation, but we've never, you know, met in the flesh. It was a really interesting experience that way.
For that, like it was absolutely amazing getting to meet all of these friends, like people that I do consider friends that I had never met in person before.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, that's really kind of the first time in my life that I've honestly fostered these relationships purely online before and could see what you're doing and you see what I'm doing. And we do talk, you know, we have each other's phone numbers, but we had just never met in person before. And so that was the most exciting part of the conference for me, to be completely honest. I also didn't get to go to nearly as many of the, you know, presentations or lectures or talk tracks that I wanted to because I was volunteering at it. So I didn't necessarily always have the free time to just kind of sit down. But I did get to see some that I wanted to see. So, you know, I'm grateful for my experience, but definitely the best part was seeing all of these people and then also actually meeting new people that I'd never talked to before that I've since now had on my podcast, and more of them that I will be having on my podcast in the future.
Yeah. Like I came home with this huge stack and I've been working my way through it. So it's been, yeah, it was really cool. And, I remember thinking, cause I remember like we were texting and you said like, oh, I'm going to be volunteering. And, maybe I'm just like bougie and privileged, but I was just like, oh, that sounds like it kind of sucks. Like I wouldn't want to be doing that. But then you had the coolest job. Like you were walking around interviewing people. And so I don't know if like the podcasting experience really paid off for you there. You know, they weren't just like, here, just stand here and like block this doorway or something. But I was like, oh, actually, this is a really cool gig you got.
Yeah, and we had no say in our gigs. Like they asked us for like some background and why we were interested. So obviously I wrote about trip sitting, and I don't know if they took that into account or if it, you know, the stars just aligned and the universe said, hey, you use this experience that you already have to basically do exactly what you kind of would have been doing anyways at the conference, which is talking to anybody and everybody about why the hell are you here.
Yeah. I thought about it at the last minute. I was like, maybe I should bring something and do like little mini interviews or short form content or something. Like, I don't know if I want to sit down and do, you know, a 60 to 90 minute podcast with somebody, and then it just turned into like too much hassle and I didn't plan for it. And I was like, okay, well, there's always next time. And I'm just going to enjoy myself, which I think turned out to be a good plan. Just like you, like there was just so much happening in terms of like meeting people that I new but hadn't seen in the 3D, or meeting new people and networking, and then all the extra stuff that was happening at the conference. I mean, definitely like this choose your own adventure kind of scenario.
There was definitely there was so much going on. Like, I would argue there was too much going on.
Right.
Because I mean, most of the time when there was somebody speaking here that I wanted to see, there was also another talk happening at the exact same time that I also wanted to see. So
Yeah.
it's almost like a music festival, like in that sense of like, there's always going to be multiple artists that you want to see at the same time, and you kind of just need to make a decision and go with it.
Right. And just like the music festival, you know, it's there's a merit to like planning your sort of your route out, and like mapping it out, rather than just being like, okay, I'm just gonna go where the wind takes me, which there was some of that too, you know, especially like when I wandered into the deep space area. It's easy to get lost in there with all the art and, you know, different stuff that was happening. I did like a couple of demos of, you know, different products that people had set up in there. And
I probably could have spent a whole day in there, to be completely honest.
The funniest thing was I didn't even go in there the first day, and people kept saying, "Oh my God, have you been in the deep space area?" And I was like, "No, where's that? Where's that?" You know? And so then like the second day I was kind of bored. I'm like, I'm going to go find this deep space area. And well, actually it was even before that. Like there was a workshop that I wanted to do, and it didn't say deep space on like the app. It just had like a exhibition hall, blah blah blah. So I'm like, I'm going around and I'm trying to find this place, and I ended up like going all the way down and then riding the elevator all the way back up, which was, if you weren't at the conference, the reason that this is funny is that the whole deep space area was right next to the vendor village where I had been spending all my time up until that point. So I like literally took this really roundabout way to get right back to next to where I was. I was like, what the hell? But yeah, the deep space was super, super cool.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely had a little bit of an agenda, although, you know, obviously it's a podcast and we can go wherever the wind takes us. But I did have a little bit of an agenda as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about. And it was from something that occurred when I was on your podcast. When I was on your podcast, you asked me this very seemingly innocent question, which was, have you ever read The Untethered Soul? And I was like, no. And I remember you being like, oh, you got to read it. It's this really amazing book. And, you know, I have a long list of books to read. I'm not going to lie. You know, I love reading. I love buying books for sure. So I end up
I just bought another book yesterday, even though I have literally 4 books right now that like I already have that I need to read, and I still bought another one.
I think a couple of years ago I made like this New Year's resolution that I wasn't gonna buy any books this year. I was just gonna read all the books that were just sort of stacking up, and that lasted till I think like February, and then I was like, oh wait, that book looks really cool. So that was my initial reaction was, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll get around to it. I'll put it on the list. And then literally within the month following that recording, no less than 6 different people mentioned this book to me. Mm-hmm. And the first time it was like, oh, wait, I've heard of that. And then the second time I was like, oh wait, okay, what's happening here? And then by the like 5th or 6th time, I'm like, damn it, I guess I got to read this book now, you know? So how did you find this book? Like, tell me about like what The Untethered Soul means to you and how you found it.
I was recommended that book while I was on my ayahuasca retreat last year in September. And I didn't read it there, but like multiple people on the retreat had mentioned it. And I think that was the first book I read when I got back from the retreat. And, that in and of itself, like kind of just holds a special place in my heart, just because that time period of my life was different, let's call it. There was a lot falling apart, and just a lot of integration, a lot of questions left unanswered that I was still trying to really find my place in the world and figure it out. But so that book helped a lot, in just helping me understand who I am, and I think even more so helping me understand who I'm not. And that was the biggest thing that ayahuasca helped me with, was really, peeling back all of those layers. Everyone's probably heard the onion analogy, but, really peeling back those layers of who we are. And that book helped me realize that, oh, I'm actually not all of these things that I thought I was. Like, who I truly am is a lot deeper than that. And so it's okay if I let some of these things go that aren't actually me. And so, yeah, it gave me a lot of comfort.
Yeah. So it sounds like the book kind of went along with some of the messages you got, or the integrations you were working on through the ayahuasca process as well.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of those things that you like let go of, or that, let's talk pre-cam and then post-cam. Like, yeah, what's the difference?
Man, it's actually almost been a year now. I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, holy shit, I did it at the beginning of September of last year, and it's August right now, which is crazy. But pre-cam was, I was working for a startup. I was working in sales. I was making a really decent amount of money for somebody my age, still only 3 years out of college. But like, that's like that was the thing that I thought was really important in life. Like, I need to have a good job that's paying me a lot of money so I can go do things if I want to do them. But like, it wasn't really living for me, if that makes sense. Like, it was still just because, my parents told me to do this because they want what's best for me, or society says that you need to have a job, especially after I just spent however much money on college for 4 years. Like, I need to do something and actually use my degree, or else it's going to waste. And so, I made kind of that startup life like a very big part of my identity. And, the fact that I guess take psychedelics, like that was not as big of a part. Like, I wasn't as open about that. I was kind of scared. Like, I was still, for the most part, like in the psychedelic closet. I didn't start attaching my name to Tripsitting. So Tripsitting actually existed before that, just as a blog. So I didn't have the podcast yet. And I still didn't put like my face on it at all until I think right before I left is when I'm like, okay, let's do this. But, ayahuasca brought up just a lot of these moments in my life, like, shame and guilt, I think is a pretty big one that comes up for people, regardless of what psychedelic you take. And I think just once you start healing, we realize how much shame and guilt we probably hold on to. But like, those were all part of my identity, but all subconsciously. So like, the ayahuasca brought that to the surface and consciously made me see like, oh, I'm still holding on to all of these times that I was ashamed of being who I was, or I felt guilty for doing something that somebody told me not to. I was still holding on to all of that energy, if that makes sense. And so, it wasn't consciously part of my identity that like, oh, like, I'm not worthy of being loved as who I am, but it was all subconsciously part of my identity. So, coming to terms with that, accepting it, and then being like, well, fuck, where do I go from here? That was a big part of the process after. So the process after was like the analogy that I used to describe it. So that was basically like, I was looking at my life, and my life was represented by this brick house. And I was just watching this brick house basically fall apart brick by brick. And there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it from falling apart. I couldn't start rebuilding yet until it had completely, fell apart. And I just had to basically wait and see where it was going to land. So, what parts of me were still going to be standing, or if it just, fucking went down all the way to the foundation or whatever before I really started to kind of rebuild. And so it was, it was turbulent, it was tough, but it was also really, really beautiful too. And I knew at the time, even though like I was struggling, going through a whole identity crisis, I knew I was struggling and it was hard, but at the same time, I could recognize the beauty in it and be like, man, this is going to be so cool when it's over. I just don't know when that's going to be. And I just have to be patient and just wait for the universe to kind of just, pick me back up and truly surrender and trust and stop controlling things. I definitely used to be a bit of a control freak. And again, not like super, you might not really be able to tell, but, in my mind, I definitely used to control my emotions, how I felt, how I wanted to feel. And that would bring me a lot of suffering. And, afterwards, now it's about, okay, just let myself feel exactly how I am in the present moment, accept the present moment for exactly what it is, and then move on and just kind of live my life moment by moment rather than trying to plan everything out and plan for my future and dwell on the past and all that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. What do you think is like a key to being able to kind of be in that uncertainty? You mentioned like sort of the groundlessness and like falling apart, but sort of trusting that it was going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck or start to turn away from whatever's happening, is that groundlessness,
Mm-hmm.
just being really caught up in what's happening in the moment rather than like trusting what's happening.
Yeah.
So like for you, like what do you think was like key to kind of staying in that discomfort?
So before I went to Peru, I did not have a meditation practice at all. I had tried before and I honestly just never understood it. I never got anything from it. But like there was a period of probably, let's call it 4 or 5 months where like I would meditate every morning before work and I'd feel nothing from it. And then I'd work and nothing would change. And I'd be like, well, let's just keep trying this. And so then I stopped eventually. And then after I did ayahuasca, I got back and I was immediately like, I need to meditate. And I just immediately finally understood what it meant to just sit there and actually be in the moment. It just didn't even click in my head. So like meditation was huge for me, and also journaling. So just two things that are relatively easy but like they take conscious effort, like to really sit still and like be in that moment. And I even notice now, like I still try to meditate and journal every day. I might not get to it every day, but I'll notice if I go like 3 or 4 days without doing either of those things, I start to feel like off. I start to feel anxious and like I can't even describe it. And then I'll do that again. I'll be like, oh, okay, this is it. Like just giving myself time to truly just be. And I say that a lot. Like it's not about doing all the time. It's just about being comfortable. It just existing in the world exactly as I am without feeling the need to do something or be productive or work towards a goal. It's just existing. Like the point of existing is just existence. There's nothing deeper than that. And just understanding like I'm here. I've already done everything I need to do, like in order to feel whole, in order to feel complete, in order to live my life, in order to be loved. There's nothing else I need to accomplish. Like we're all perfect, truly exactly as we are. And so, that's what ayahuasca showed me. So then going back and during my meditations, it's kind of like tapping back into that and trusting like, oh fuck, okay, I'm already perfect. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to stop this house from falling apart. I just need to be in it.
It sounds like the meditation and the journaling are both going along with one of these sort of central themes of the Untethered Soul, which is like, hey, start being aware of the voice in your head and the thoughts and stories that, you know, it's telling you, and starting to detach from identifying with that voice, right? So meditation definitely allows you to do that, because you're just sitting there like on the edge of this river, just watching the thoughts and the narratives and the feelings and sensations and everything from the mundane to the really like heavy kind of float by. And, you know, there's the constant sort of urge to dive into the water and like swim after a particular thought and add more
Mm-hmm.
to it. And
Add
then
more or like change it or be like,
right.
why is that there? Like that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the ways that I've been like explaining meditation lately is sort of, you know, like when you go to an art museum and you see like I'm not a painter guy, so I don't know all the
Not a
terminology.
painter guy.
I'm not a
I think.
painter guy. Well, I had to take an art history class to like even understand some of this stuff, but like sometimes when you go to like you see like these, you know, beautiful paintings and you can see them up close, you can see like the layers of paint. Like it's not a flat two-dimensional surface, right? There's like depth, and you can see how the painter added different layers on top of each other. And
Mm,
so I think when we don't practice mindfulness meditation, that's kind of what we're doing in the mind. It's like maybe there's an initial thought, and then we're adding additional layers onto it, whether that's shame, guilt, like what I want out of this, what I don't want out of this, tangents to whatever that thought is. It's not just like, here's this thought, here's this thought. You start to see where it's like, and it could be like the stupidest stuff too. It's like, oh, like a cheeseburger sounds good right now. Oh, you know where I got a good cheeseburger from? Like this restaurant. Oh, you know, and then like I wonder if Abe wants to go there, and maybe I should call him up and like,
Man,
well,
I haven't
and like,
talked to Abe
and
in a
10 minutes,
while.
right? Like 10 minutes later, you're like, oh wait, I'm thinking, like, come back to the breath, you know? So it's not just the one thing, it's just like layer, 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 layer. Um, and then journaling is, you know, kind of the same way, right? Like it's
Hmm.
sort of, for me, it slows the thought process down to the writing level. And it's like almost like things start to become a little more clear as I slow down and I'm a little more focused on that stream.
Yeah. And I actually, ideally, I like to journal right after I meditate
Mm.
because then, you know, I'm kind of at that clear space from the meditation. And then the journaling helps to then, okay, now how do I get back to sort of consciously thinking and putting down what I want to without all the noise there, and, you know, hopefully keep that going throughout the day.
Mm. Yeah. Uh, what was your experience like in Peru? Like, how long were you there?
I was there for 2 weeks in total in Peru, but the retreat itself was 6 days, and so I did that at the beginning, and then I traveled around Peru for the week after that, um, and also too, you know, it was a big integration week, so I think if I would have just had to go home and gone right back to work, I'd have been fucked.
Right.
Things would have been different. But the retreat itself, it was at this place called Dreamglade, um, which I absolutely love and highly recommend if anybody is ever looking to go on an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. Dreamglade in Iquitos is absolutely amazing. It's very, very bare bones, so like it doesn't have the amenities that I think a lot of these places are having. It's not, you know, the comforts that you're probably looking for. It is in the middle of the jungle. You are sleeping in either the Maloka or a Tambo. There is no Wi-Fi, no cell service. It's just you out there with 7 other people, and then the facilitators and the curanderos. But yeah, so we did 3 ceremonies in total: Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And yeah, Tuesday and Thursday were just days to do whatever the fuck you wanted. So you could sit and read, you could jump in the lake, you could go on a run, you know, you talk to curanderos, the facilitators about whatever you want. But it was just a really nice mental reset. And there was nothing to do there except for, you know, focus on yourself and focus on healing. You know, there weren't all of the distractions that we have in everyday life. And that was honestly my first time that I can remember ever intentionally like doing that, like truly just getting away from the distractions. Like I just did a social media cleanse this past week, but like the very first time I ever did social media, like any sort of cleanse like that, where I was just disconnected, was during that retreat. And I remember how great I felt afterwards. I was like, holy shit, is this what it's like to not be having constant notifications going on in my pocket all the time and phantom vibrations that I feel that aren't even there? And so, you know, it helped me reframe my relationship with that. And, you know, that's why I try to do cleanses now semi regularly in order to get back to that. But yeah, my experience was, and it was also too the ceremonies themselves. They were all vastly different experiences. The first ceremony was just a lot of laughter and joy and happiness and, like, you know, love for others. And this is, you know, what it feels like to really love people for who they are and not want them to change or anything like that. You know, not loving people for who you want them to be. And then the second ceremony was just pure pain and suffering. And I wanted it to be over so fast, and just a lot of judgment. And that's when, you know, all the shame and guilt really came up for me. And I just had to sit there with it. But that was the one where I think that was the most powerful ceremony for me. That's where, like, I really understood what unconditional self-love felt like. And that's been one of the biggest lessons for me that I try to take into everything. I really think that most people's problems are caused from the inability to truly love themselves for who they are. I think that if everybody actually felt that real feeling of self-love, you know, the oneness with the universe, you know, that we're all connected, I think a lot of the problems that we have kind of just go away on their own, as long as we accept that for what it is and love ourselves for who we are. Because to me, everything just made sense after that. And I can't even explain why. Just everything made sense. And then the third ceremony was kind of a mix of the first two, because me being the impatient person that I am, being like, oh, one ceremony left. I'm like, wow, those are such great lessons. Like, what's next? And then Mother Ayahuasca is like, I don't think you quite got the first two, so let's just repeat those real quick. And that was also kind of, I was exhausted after that one. And I didn't understand why, like, nothing new happened at all until, you know, months later. I was like, oh, that's why, like, I didn't get the first two quite yet. I was being impatient and judgmental. Thanks, Mother Ayahuasca.
So as a, you know, experienced psychonaut, what do you think sets ayahuasca apart from other entheogens or, you know, medicines that we can work with?
That's a great question, and one I honestly still struggle answering. One, I think that there's, you know, all these medicines, and I mean, everything you put into your body, you know, has a different energy. And I think the energy of ayahuasca, you know, being the grandmother, it's so loving, yet can be so stern at the exact same time. And it just, I don't know, it allowed me to go deeper than any of the other medicines had ever truly been before. Like, I think with some of the other medicines I've taken, like, I can still kind of use my mind to be like, oh no, like, I'm not going to let you fully take control of me and sort of have that true ego death. Whereas ayahuasca did not give me the choice. Like, I've never been in pain before while on a psychedelic until I did ayahuasca. Like my stomach was literally killing me, like the cramps and stuff. And obviously, given that purging is also a big part of it, the other medicines don't make you do that. So there's a certain energy that comes with the physical purging, but it's, you know, you're physically purging a lot of these emotions that are inside of you. And so the connection between the mind, body, spirit, I think was a lot more apparent with ayahuasca than it has been with any of the other medicines I've taken. And I guess also, just so people are aware, I've done LSD, I've done mushrooms, psilocybin, I've done ketamine, but not in not like a therapeutic setting. Like I haven't had like the IV. I've just like bumped ketamine at a fucking concert, so I don't really know if that counts.
So, it depends who you're talking to.
Yeah, you know, you can have some spiritual experiences doing that. By the way, I don't want to knock that. Like I don't want to say that you can't. So like it definitely can count.
Yeah.
But really LSD and mushrooms is what I'm most experienced with. I did a lot of LSD in college, and since then I've now done quite a bit of mushrooms.
I like this idea that I heard from Kalindi Eiley. He was talking about how the different molecules, right? So he like even didn't really differentiate between the natural plant medicines versus something like LSD or MDMA in this context. But he said that the molecules develop a relationship with us as like a sort of a species, as humanity as a whole. And so that's why like the relationship that humanity has with LSD, for instance, is infantile, right? Because it's only been around for, you know, less than 100 years. And he was saying like no knock to ayahuasca, like obviously you can do a lot of work there, but he was like, you know, ayahuasca's only been around since for as long as people have had fire and like a pot to cook it in, as opposed to, you know, mushrooms being there basically since before humanity, you know, like before a human came around and was like, oh, well, I'm gonna eat this, right? Like the mushrooms were there. So just, I don't know, it was an interesting thought that's kind of stuck with me, especially now, you know, with these more novel and new you know, medicines and substances coming out into the world. And I agree with you. I mean, like there is a wonderful magic that is accomplished with taking care of your set and setting and treating what you're doing and the experience like as a ceremony. And at the same time, like I would be a hypocrite to say that I haven't had magical, like transformative spiritual experiences in a completely recreational setting, like without any idea about what integration was or what set and setting was. And I mean, I think even like to take it a step further, like in high school, it was almost like if we had known what set and setting was, we would probably have been like, let's just try to have the worst setting and just see what happens. It's like, you know, like let's go to
see if we can take it.
Yeah, let's go to Six Flags and take acid, or like, you know, just places that I would never want to be. Like
when I was in college, I would take like 2 full like very, very strong acid and just go to the bars, like with all my friends that are drunk. And like, I would be there being like, I don't know what the fuck is going on right now. I would just be out of my mind. But like, to your point, without those experiences, I don't think I ever would have been, or I don't think it would have happened nearly as quickly, me being then open to the more intentional experiences. I don't think I would have been drawn to ayahuasca near, you know, this early in my life, had it not been for all of those incredibly silly recreational experiences with absolutely no regard to myself or anybody around me.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I think silliness is a good sort of rite of passage as far as at least LSD. I
Yeah.
mean,
I can now look back at it too and think, I'm like, oh, that was just inner child work. That's all that really was.
mm,
I didn't have that vocabulary at the time, and I didn't recognize, have the conscious ability to recognize that. But like, that's been a big part of my healing journey. And the first ceremony with ayahuasca too, of me just laughing the whole time, being like, damn, this is fun, this is happy. Like that connected me with those experiences. I specifically remember thinking about those experiences with LSD during that first ceremony and being like, oh, like, stop being so fucking serious all the time. You don't have to be this put together serious individual. Like, you're allowed to go out and just have fun for the sake of having fun. It doesn't have to be a reason behind it.
that's a good lesson. Yeah. So do you feel sort of that urge to be serious come up sometimes? Like, is it more conscious now?
Yeah, I still feel it, and I'm a lot better at recognizing it and being like, like, that's, there's obviously times, there's times to be serious, there's times to get work done, but when it starts to kind of take control of me to where I can't have fun at something I should be having fun at, I can sort of recognize, like, oh, okay, like, stop thinking about the podcast that you have to edit tomorrow, and like, enjoy spending time with your friends tonight. There's no it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So I'm a lot better just consciously recognizing it. And typically once I do that, I gotta take a few conscious deep breaths, feel back into the body. This goes back to the meditation, and feel back into the body and be like, surrender, allow yourself to have fun.
Yeah. For me, like, sometimes how that comes up, especially around the podcast, is just reminding myself that I'm the one putting the pressure on myself. Like, if I don't edit this podcast tonight, I'm the only one that's going to get upset. I'm the only one that really knows about it. Like, I don't have to put that pressure on me.
Yeah.
It's like when people are like, hey guys, I'm going to be off social media for like a week, so don't freak out. And it's like, they have like 100 followers, and it's like, dude, it would be okay. Like, you didn't need to announce that.
I mean,
like,
fuck, I even made a post about that before my little social media cleanse. I don't know, maybe 1,000 followers or something like that. Like, I don't think anyone gave a shit.
Yeah.
But it was just, I think maybe in my mind, there's like probably 2 or 3 people that might hit me up and that might be worried if I'm not responding in a timely manner. So like, the whole post was really for those 3 people.
Right. Yeah.
who I could have just texted and told, like, oh, by the way, I'm not going to have my phone.
Yeah. I had that moment like maybe 6 months ago where all of a sudden I started getting messages of like, hey, like, how's it going? Haven't seen you posting much. Like, haven't seen it. Like, you still doing the podcast? And I was like, oh shit, now I need to do something, because we've crossed the threshold into that. But at the same time, like, I don't know if you've been using the Threads platform.
No.
So I joined it out of curiosity, and I saw so many people posting things like, wow, I love this platform because there's no pressure and I can just be myself. Like, I don't have to worry about the algorithm. I don't have to worry about what people are thinking. I can just post and be me. And my initial like reaction to that was this curiosity of like, why aren't you living your life like that at all? Like, I get we have brands and businesses, and I try to be as authentic as possible with anything that I'm doing, even when I've recognized that maybe that's the slow growth. Maybe that's the slow lane.
It is.
But at the same time, like, why am I going to like make myself miserable and put myself on this like mental trial trying to be somebody that I'm not, or that's not authentic, or doing something for likes, or, stuff like that.
Yeah, what you were talking about earlier with kind of like, the painters and, when you're thinking of these thoughts and you're just adding layers, if you're not living authentically, you're adding all these layers. And then not only that, but now you're spending all this time trying to keep those layers in place. And that
Mm.
just takes so much effort and energy. And as you said, it's going to make you miserable in the long run because that's not you. Like, you can convince yourself that that is you at some point, but the body is always going to know that that's not you, and there's always going to be that internal suffering deep, deep, deep down, even if you can't recognize it. um, and yeah, that was a big part of my change as well with trip sitting, and kind of what it represented for me was actually finally being able to live authentically as me. And I think we kind of just fall into it, especially my generation, that came up sort of at the beginning of all these social media apps before they turned into the absolute giant behemoths that try to control your mind that they are. It was before the algorithms, and then we get sucked into the algorithms because we're on it while it's changing. And so we don't know it's happening. Like, we have no idea, like, oh, why did they change the layout? Like, oh, I liked it better before, not realizing
Right.
that we're slowly getting more and more kind of brainwashed.
Yeah.
So like, I actually want to talk about this with you. Like, has your relationship with social media changed throughout the years? Because like my
Oh God, yeah.
relationship with social media now, like, honestly, as somebody who has grown trip sitting purely through social media, I I really don't go on that often, or I try not to, and look at anybody else's posts. Like, I try to go on there, post something, and get off the app. I have my notifications off. I try not to check it. Like, I don't like going on just because I know that, like, it's designed to suck me in, and I don't
Yeah.
like that at all. And like, it's this necessary evil, but at the same time, I've met you through social media. I've met
Right.
so many amazing people. I've networked with people that I never would have been able to have access to because of social media. So it's this back and forth that I go through of, yes, it's evil, but it can be used for good. And so I think it's important to be intentional about your use, and
Yeah.
that's really it. Like, if you use it with intention, I think it's good. If you're just using it to pass the time, and almost no scenarios do I think that that's good.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a complex topic because like you mentioned, it is a tool, and you could use that argument of like, well, a tool isn't good or bad, it's how you're using it. But like when you're using a hammer, the hammer's not actively trying to like
hit
lash
you
back
back
at
in the
you and hit you
face.
back, right? Yeah. Which like I think the you know social media sort of is in a way.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like, here's this thing for your enjoyment. It's also like, no, actually we want that attention, or we want your money, we want something from you, and it's actively trying to extract that in whatever way it can.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's been a long uh kind of relationship in different ways. I mean, I was purely like a consumer for a long time in the beginning, like MySpace and Facebook. Like I didn't have any aspirations of like having anything besides a way to connect with people that I knew, or maybe make new friends.
I wish I was around for MySpace, man. I'm just gonna date you a little bit right now, but that 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 seems
Me
like
and
the golden
Tom,
age
we're
of
like
social
this,
media. Yeah.
yeah. And then like I remember, especially during the Trump election, like literally having to shut Facebook off. Like I literally deleted my Facebook because I realized how much energy and time I was putting into getting really fired up about this thing that I didn't like, and responding and arguing with people that didn't feel the same way. And it was just like sucking the life out of me. And I only realized that after I completely pulled the plug.
Yeah.
And then going back onto Facebook like a year later, and like literally the impression that I had was like walking into a room that I had just left a minute ago. And yet a whole year had changed. And I'm like, this is the same echo chamber with the same people in their echo bubbles, like yelling at the cloud, and they don't even get it. And I think that was where I started to try to use it more intentionally. Like you said, it's a wonderful tool for networking and for connecting. I started the podcast on Instagram, so it's like I used having a live element and other people's audiences to like help bootstrap my podcast when there was no, audience for it. And I remember like feeling at the beginning of COVID, especially, and this is not just limited to social media, but like all of a sudden there were all these things and people that I had access to because of Zoom and because of social media. Like I wouldn't have been able to fly to Paris necessarily and like go to this particular like Buddhist teaching, but there it was on Zoom and I could like tune in, and I didn't even have to leave my house. And so in a way, like I went through this period where I was like, wow, this is like, it's almost like we've evolved.
Like it's like democratizing access to these things that we normally would never have access to.
And then, like as I've begun to run my brand and these various, sort of branches underneath that brand, mostly through social media, it's taken on this whole other life where it's like noticing trends and seeing like, oh, do I want to try this or not? Like, and how can I try this, but still have it be on brand, like,
and by on brand, I just mean like authentic and me.
Yeah.
Which is also the thing, like, to me, it's kind of thinking about that. I'm like, what would I do in this scenario?
Right. Like, I think it's important to do it that way. And I think where a lot of people get stuck is doing it the opposite way, where they're like, I can't start until I know
how to do everything. Like I need to know how to edit this. Yeah, no. And that was, I specifically remember like putting out my first episodes and telling myself, this does not have to be perfect. You've got maybe 12 motherfuckers on this entire planet of 8 billion that are going to listen to this.
Right.
It does not matter.
Yeah.
And like, that was, but it's still always the hurdle to get over is like, I want this to be perfect. But like, even the way that I make clips now, like for Instagram, like I used to just go in Riverside and just get, up and the top and bottom and just find it in there and just, download it and post it. Whereas now I go in and actually like do it all myself,
right.
With like each individual clips and all of that. And again, make it look pretty, but it's like, it's not even like, obviously, yes, I want engaging content, but like, I took some time to think, I'm like, why do I want to do this? I'm like, I think this looks better. Like, this is cool for me. And now I'm learning all these cool video editing skills that if you would have told me a year ago that I know how to edit videos online, like, I tell you, absolutely not. Right. Whereas now, like, I have this whole new set of skills that I've just taught not because I needed to, but like, because I actually wanted to. Like, you feel pride when you put out content, but like, I don't care if 2 people see it or if 2,000 people see it. Like, I still kind of take pride in my work, and that's why I want it to look good.
Yeah, there was something that you had said a while back that like really resonated in terms of feeling miserable doing these things that we are doing and that we love to do. And like you, before I started doing all these things, I had a pretty good paying job, and like, I am a little bit older than you. Like, I had 10 years, at the last company that I worked with that, just ended in April. Yeah. So I was working full time in a career, the whole time that I've been building Blue Magic Alchemy and building the podcast. And one of the things that I was like the most concerned about when I first started was like, I want to have as much fun with this as possible. And I get that it's a business and there's going to be times where I'm like, I'm going to have to do things and it's not going to be, puppy dogs and rainbows fun. But at the same time, literally my mantra was like, I make a lot of money and I'm already miserable. So if I'm just going to be miserable doing this, I might as well stay with what I'm doing because I'm going to be making a lot more money.
Yeah.
Trying to start something new. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like it's not that I can't make money doing what I'm doing. In fact, I've been pleasantly surprised that like right now I feel like I'm making more money than I have in my entire life. But there was that leap of faith where it was like, oh crap, like I'm giving up the W-2 and the health insurance and all the things. But again, it was like trying to have fun as much as possible and letting that be the lead of like, well, am I having fun with this? No, I'm not. Okay. Like, let's just like, let this go, you know, and really double down on the things that are fun and the things that don't make me miserable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I've had those. I mean, probably once a month I go through that with Tripsitting. I'm like, you know, and I'm like, I need to edit this. I need to put out content, blah, 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 blah. You know, the voice inside my head. But like, you know, thinking like, wait, this is supposed to be fun. I told myself at the beginning, if this ever gets to a point where it's not fun, you fucking stop. Because like, again, you know, that, you know, we kind of make these identities for ourselves, whereas like, you know, now I'm Cam. I do Tripsitting. This is my thing. But like, that's not me at the end of the day. Like, I am more than that. So if I don't do Tripsitting, I'm still Cam at the end of the day. So like, I don't need to keep doing this. But, you know, it's thinking like, am I having fun? Is this still fun? If it's not fun, why aren't I having fun? And how do I get back to having fun? And then just kind of moving into that direction of towards this is fun and enjoyable. And if it's not, stop doing it.
Isn't that interesting though, that like for at least sort of most of the people in our society, like what you do for a living is so tied to your identity.
It's crazy.
I mean, like how many?
That's the first question I get when I meet someone. They're like, "What do you do?" And the funny thing is, I have no idea how to answer that question anymore.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I do a lot of drugs. Does that count? You know, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a podcast host, but like I also write. I also work at a restaurant right now. You know, I'm also about to start working with an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica, and you know, they kind of get confused, and like I feel myself wanting to try to dumb down my answer or like be more concise for the sake of other people, but then I have to remind myself I don't live my life for other people, so I'm gonna let them be confused.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally true. And you know, I remember going from that through this internal transition of changing the answer from, oh, I'm a business process analyst to I'm a breathwork facilitator. And like, even like how weird that felt like the first time. And then, you know, I mean, even that has become this sort of multi-dimensional, like, you know, now it's like, now I'm doing coaching and I'm a specialty, you know, I'm a specialty therapist at a, you know, residential inpatient treatment center. I guess you could call me an integrative therapist for, you know, more of a descriptor. And I do integration coaching and I host, you know, integration circles and I have a podcast and, you know, like you end up doing all these things. My coach, I guess she wasn't really my coach, but like my sort of TA during this meditation teacher training that I did fairly recently with Dharma Moon. She calls it being multi-hyphenate, which I thought was like a really cool, you know, descriptor, because I feel like we are moving more towards that. It's like, yeah, there are people that are still on sort of that traditional path of like, this is my job and my career. And, you know, it's like my stepdad, for instance, has worked for Trader Joe's for over 30 years. He had like one job right out of college, and then he started working for Trader Joe's, and now he's been a store manager for like 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, like, I remember having conversations with him like 10 years ago, talking about like, are you happy? Like, are you going to stay? And he was like, well, I'm not always happy, but like, there's no, like, I'm not going to make as much money going and doing something else. Like, what am I going to do other places? And I know people like that. I know people that have had the same job their entire working life. And the longer that you're there, for a variety of reasons, it gets harder to leave. That might be what my stepdad called the golden handcuffs, where it's like you're making too much money to think about wanting to go someplace else. It might be like fear and insecurity holding you back. It might be just like comfort is the most important thing. And let me not forget that I am completely privileged being able to say that, because there are people that are in situations where it would be much more difficult for them to like leave and turn over a new leaf or start a new career. I don't have any kids, it's like, I don't have college debt, like I'm incredibly privileged in that way to be able to like set my sail and go with relatively few responsibilities. Whereas, if I had a kid or something, like, I think I would be thinking about that a little bit more, right? Because it's not just me that I have to think about taking care of.
I completely agree with that, and that is a point I do try to make, probably at least once every 5 episodes I'll mention, but like, we're privileged to be here talking about what we're talking about, even talking about psychedelics. Like, there are people in some circles where if you mention that, people will outcast you.
Right.
And so we still live in a society like that. And so, I think that's why it's important that you and I have these conversations to make it more normal. But there are a lot of places where there are not communities, there are not places to go. I mean, I live in Denver, where they just had psychedelic science. I'm blessed that I was able to just be like, fuck it, I'm going to move to Denver in February. Like, a lot of people can't just up and do that.
Right.
So, I recognize that, but just because that's the case, like, I think there's some people that want to make you feel guilty for having privilege. And that's where I disagree. Like, if you can recognize your privilege, like that's it. Recognize what it does for you and realize that other people don't have it, and try to make it equal. Try to do your best to see when there's some inequalities in the world. But just because I have my privilege doesn't mean that I'm going to make my life harder just for the sake of it for other people to make them more comfortable.
Yeah, well said. And I think there's also something to be mentioned there in terms of intention. Like, if I'm using that privilege for like a good intention versus just like, want to party like a rock star and, do whatever wherever I want.
Yeah, I mean, I even mentioned in my episode that I made after psychedelic science. It was just like a short solo episode, but there were a lot of people that seemed to be there for money. And that was the main thing that they cared about, is how do we make this a viable business opportunity that we can, again, turn into something for ourselves. Like, yes, we're doing great things and, we are helping people along the way. But at the end of the day, you can kind of tell who's in it just to make a quick buck and dip, like who genuinely cares and who doesn't. And I think it's important to recognize that, like, the psychedelic industry, if you can really even call it that at this point, which I still don't think we can. It is still in its very, very early infancy. But it's not different. It's not it's not on a different pedestal than any of these other industries. It's going to have the exact same problems that they will, the exact same people that try to get in. It's not going to be different. But what I do think there is there's a different sort of stewardship in the types of people that are wanting to get into it as opposed to some of these other industries. So I think there's a lot more talk around, who the good players are, and sort of recognizing that, it's sort of our responsibility as the people that are kind of on the ground floor building this to try to do our best to make sure that the people that are in this for the right reasons are the ones that are going to be successful, and the people that are not, I just don't pay attention to them. Like, that's like, if I don't think that you're acting with integrity, I'm not going to go out of my way and be like, hey guys, don't use this product or this service, they're just doing that. Cause like, that's not going to work either. That just, that makes me kind of the exact same, in my opinion. It's just, if we act through pure love and intention, and from that place of authenticity, it invites others to continue to do the same. And when you have a bunch of people doing that, it then becomes really easy to find the people who aren't doing that, and they're not going to survive in this environment.
Yeah. And I want to add one thing to that, which is, to kind of go back to what you shared about your ayahuasca experience, and like going through that, and like kind of being deconstructed a bit in terms of like, oh, this actually isn't me. I can peel away these layers. I can take away these things. Like, yeah, there's going to be people in any industry and in our capitalist society where this is the system. This is the matrix that we're in, right? Is this exploitive kind of colonial thought of what can I take and what's for me, and like, how can I make the most money? Yeah, that's going to be in any industry within the matrix that that we're in. However, psychedelics are also, as Stan Groff put it, non-specific amplifiers. And so there are going to be people that maybe they have a psychedelic experience and it amplifies their narcissism or their self-centeredness. There's also going to be a ton of people where they like start to see those things about themselves. They start to deconstruct and maybe go, wait a minute, this isn't me. Or like, maybe hold on, let me like examine my motivations. And that's honestly what I have faith in.
Yeah.
Like, I have faith that the plants and these medicines have some sort of agenda. Like, it might not be like maybe agenda is not the right word, because like that's like a human kind of idea, but there's something like energetically that is going to happen when a bunch of people start working with psychedelics, especially like people that, because of this system that we're in, I'm just going to keep calling it the matrix because I like it.
Yeah. It is.
All of a sudden, like, the matrix is saying, now these are okay. Well, I never would have taken mushrooms before, but now it's legal, so it's okay, right? And I think that's a really cool thing about psychedelics, is like, sometimes you get a lot more than you bargained for.
Yeah.
You can go in with a strong intention, and I think the more work that you do, the stronger those, or the clearer those intentions might get, with this at the same time, like, being able to surrender and like let go of them in the moment when the medicine's like, hey, actually, this is what we're doing right now. Like, don't worry about that intention. But like, I think people are just going to start seeing some shit that maybe they weren't used to or expecting. And I'm curious to see what's going to happen out of that. The people that like haven't been doing this for years, regardless of the legal status, how that's going to change them.
I'm hoping that what comes from this psychedelic renaissance is that deconstructing of the entire system as it is. Because once you deconstruct the self, you deconstruct everything around you too.
Right.
And realize, why do I do these things? Like, why do I feel the need to have a 9 to 5 job in some corporate environment. And if I don't do that, I don't feel like I'm successful. Like for me, that was a big thing. Why did I feel that?
Yeah.
And so understanding like, oh, there's no real reason. Actually, like all of this is made up. Like everything, like the whole system's made up. It can be made up again, theoretically. It's a lot harder once it gets bigger, but it can. And it only starts with what's the very next step. And that goes back to living in the present of like, I'm not trying to rethink the entire system. And so when I do have this conversation, someone's like, oh, well, you know, how would you get rid of it? I'm like, I have no idea what it's going to look like on the other ends. Like, I don't think that far. I don't need to think that far. I just need to trust that if I do the very next thing that I think is the right step, it will eventually get to where it needs to be. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I trust that it's going to be what's best.
Okay, I want to tie this back into something I wanted to bring up a while back, because I think this is a good segue. Something that's been coming up and been kind of alive for me on the podcast lately is the balance between effort and effortlessness, right? And like you mentioned, like being like everything is perfect and I'm perfect. There's nothing that I have to heal necessarily. Like there's nothing wrong with me. There's on the one side. And I think that that's something that the Untethered Soul talks about. It's something that Buddhism talks about a lot. When I had my meditation teacher, David Nichtern, on the podcast, he talked about this. The way that he puts it is suddenly free from fixed mind, right? So that's on the one side. And then on the other side, you have the reality that there is a certain amount of effort to be able to stay in that space. Like the Stoic explanation would be that happiness is a result, like a byproduct of the things that you're doing. Yeah. The meditation or the breath work, the journaling, the ice baths, the integration, you know, all the things that we're doing on a regular basis. So where's that balance for you, like between the effort and the effortlessness?
Constantly shifting. Yeah, and this is something I think about a lot. I think the way that I put it, and I've talked about, it's the between doing and being. Where is the balance between those things? And I mean, I think the uncomplicated answer is that it's obviously different for everybody, but it's the constant kind of flow between the two. You know, it's never going to be all of one. It's never going to be all of the other. It's never going to just stay right in the middle. It's always going to be in some sort of flow. And it's just sort of being able to recognize, where am I at in that flow right now, and letting it just flow through you. Because I've had times where I want to sit and do absolutely nothing. I can't think of stuff. And, you know, I'll take 30 minutes or an hour and just literally sit and let myself feel like absolute shit. And like, I'll cry and I'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing in life. And then that'll end and I'll feel amazing. And like, I'll be like, I want to go work out, and like, oh my God, I just had this great idea for something to write about. I'm going to go write about it. And so it's, you know, being able to just recognize where you are in the present moment. Like, that's why I think that that's so important, is being able to be present. It allows you to catch that wave of between, when do I need to put an effort and when do I need to stop putting an effort?
Yeah. And if like you didn't give yourself that time, you might have spent the whole day like scrolling on the phone or like drinking or doing something else to try to escape from the discomfort of being with yourself for that 30 minutes and like just like letting it move through you and complete, right? And that's where we get stuck, you know, is like, instead of it being, well, like, okay, for the next 30 minutes, it's like, well, I just spent the whole day scrolling on my phone because there's something that I didn't want to feel. And then, and then I took like a Xanax to fall asleep. And then like, I need this. And before you know it, the nervous system is sort of forgotten or has never been shown how to safely and healthily, is that a word? Regulate. And so we just become reliant on these unhealthy methods to help us try to regulate. And, and then you end up,
it's like escapism. You're
not
really dealing with it. Like you might think you're dealing with it, but like, and I've had that happen before too, where I feel bad and I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna give myself 10 minutes or, again, 30 minutes, let's say, to just sit here and feel like shit. But let's say like after that 30 minutes, I have to go do something, whatever it is, or like I want to go do something. If I'm spending that whole 30 minutes thinking about the thing that I have to do after the 30 minutes is ending, I'm not really using those 30 minutes to actually deal with my stuff. Like I'm not actually being present during that time and dealing with it. I'm still thinking about the thing I have to do in the future. So that's, that didn't work in that scenario. And that's happened many, many times.
Did you get any advice or help with that technique? Because it's what's funny to me is like I'm going through the somatic experiencing professional training right now. And we have to do these like personal sessions with, qualified trainers. And the first session that I did with this person, they were like, and I was talking about how hard it is for me to just like stop and relax sometimes. And then I'm always like, I have 10 things to do. And like, there's the list is never done. And like, I'm very high functioning in that way. And she was like, oh yeah, that's like a trauma response. Like that's like a way that you keep yourself safe, is like, you're always busy, you're always being useful. And her suggestion was like, why don't you just spend 5 minutes a day just like not doing anything? Just like learn how to be frozen, which is like the sort of not move, but like in terms of the nervous system, right? We can go into fight or flight. And if that doesn't work, we freeze. Or we can get unmobilized. We're just kind of just deflated and not able to like really do anything. And like her suggestion literally was like, start doing that for 5 minutes a day. This is a hard fucking thing to do. Like, I'm like, how is this hard? I'm not doing anything.
And I think I'll, like, back to what I was saying, like at the way beginning about how I never understood meditation before. It's because meditation in my mind was still something to do. Like I'm doing meditation, whereas meditation is giving myself time to be. Like it's the exact opposite of doing something. It's literally just giving myself that time to just be and exist. And it's not something to do. But sometimes in my mind, I'm still like, oh, fuck, I have to go meditate. Like that's 10 minutes that I got to just sit there and do nothing. But I'm spending the whole 10 minutes thinking about what I'm doing after I'm done meditating. So I'm not really getting anything from it.
Well, I would argue that you are getting something from that, because every time you notice and bring your mind back, that's building that mindfulness skill. That's building that clarity, and you're practicing the clarity, you're practicing being able to let go. And it's like a rep. Each time you do it, it's like another rep. And over time, those reps start to add up and compound. And while you might not notice it during that particular sit, it definitely starts to compound, especially when you're doing it consistently.
I agree with
you. So back to our friend, the Untethered Soul. Is there a particular lesson or part of the book that's been really impactful to you?
There's this part I have to go back and read it. I'll admit it's been a while, but there's one specific part which is, I think, right at the beginning of it, close to the beginning, where it talks about, like, if I were to ask you, like, who are you? Like, and then you say, oh, I'm Cam. And then it goes through and like, well, what if your name wasn't Cam? Like, what if you had a different name? Would you still be you? And I'm like, yeah, fuck, I guess I would be. And you're like, okay, who are your parents? Okay, these are them. Like, okay, if they weren't if they weren't around, like, would you still be you? I'm like, fuck yeah, I guess I would. And just going through sort of like that pattern of thinking, like, oh, I'm Cam, I have the Tripsitting Podcast, and I do these things, and I like these things. If all of those were to change, would I still be me? And the answer is still yes. So, that really got me thinking a lot about who are we as individuals. We're not the things that we do and the narratives that are in our mind that we tell ourselves about who we are and what we've been through. We're not our trauma and our responses to that trauma. We are much deeper than that. So it's, giving us kind of permission to let these things go, and not get so caught up and attached to these things that aren't really us at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's so easy to get stuck in any one of those sort of labels or layers of whether it's what we're doing or who our parents were or our interests, our job,
the things that happen to us,
the things I like that you mentioned, the trauma, because that is something that I see, in my work now. And it's something that's like really central to somatic experiencing, that Peter Levine talked about is, when we're living with trauma, it becomes our reality, so it's like the way that Peter Levine talks about it is that you are in a trauma vortex, and you're unable to get out of that vortex. And anytime you like manage to like move away from it a little bit, you get sucked right back into the middle of it. And ways to start creating a counter vortex outside of that, and like ways to work with your own vortex without like getting pulled into the middle where it's completely overwhelming. And then, from the nervous system perspective, which goes along with that, it's like trauma changes the way that we respond and are experiencing things inside of our body and outside of our body. Like, and it can be as subtle as, I say something like I set a boundary, or I say something to my girlfriend, and her facial expression, like in that moment, reminds me of like my mom growing up. And like all of a sudden there's something that's happening that's completely not happening in reality, but inside of my reality, it's totally happening. It's there. Right. And or you see somebody that, I don't know. I always use the example of like a car wreck. Like there's people that get into a car accident and then they really have trouble driving a car after that. Cause like in their mind, in their body, there's like this thought of this isn't safe. Right. Even though, yeah, like most of us will probably have some sort of car accident at some point in our lives. And it's not, and we still get back in the car and do it. And that to me, I think is one like defining part of trauma, is that the imprint that it leaves and like what's there and how it changes that experience.
Yeah.
I did a podcast like recently and I was talking about trauma and psychedelics. And I remembered a very early LSD experience in high school where like, I'm going to date myself again here. So maybe you won't get this one, but like there used to be this like, PSA, like anti-drug PSA. And it was like an egg in a frying pan.
Oh,
it was like, this is your brain.
I've seen
this
that.
is your brain on drugs. Right. And in, when I was in high school, like we used to call taking acid frying. And this acid was really, really strong and like almost overwhelmingly strong. And I remember what happened. What the first thing that happened was like this thought bubbled up of like, wow, I'm like really high right now. My brain is like frying. And then I started to hear my brain like a fried egg in a pan. I could hear it inside my head. And then the like egg yolk, like an over easy egg. Like this egg started dripping out of both of my ears, and I could feel it dripping on my shoulder. And this went on for like an hour.
Yeah.
And I could hear it, and I could smell it, and I could feel it. And it was fucking scary. But I came out of that. I can talk about that now. At no point was there ever like, I need to go work on that with an integration coach.
Yeah.
It feels unsafe to talk about it or to go back to, take acid again. It just happened, and it was a really uncomfortable experience, but like it didn't leave any imprint the way that, we talked about it a little bit when I was on your show, having my shoulder dislocate and fracture in the middle of a 5-gram mushroom journey. It's like that. If you took the psychedelic aspect out of that, it was still traumatic. Right. And so that took me, and still is taking me, like a long time to sort of recover and get over that feeling of unsafe, because like somewhere in my nervous system, being in an expanded state, it has equated itself to that injury.
I think
just because of the set and setting,
what's also really interesting is like, as we get older and we kind of just become, I think, just more aware of our own death and just more conscious of the fact that like, this isn't permanent. We kind of need to take care of ourselves. And like, we want to avoid certain things, that it almost leaves the door open for things like that happen to be more traumatic than if they happened as a kid. And I'll tell this story that happened this weekend. I was going mushroom foraging, as one does. And I was with a whole big group, and we were with a guide and everything. And some of the people I were with were talking about scuba diving. And they're like, I want to get scuba certified, but like, I can't get over the hump of like, what if I have a panic attack? Like, what if something goes wrong when I'm 80 feet deep? What do I do? And then I'm like, oh, I'm actually scuba certified. I got certified when I was in high school. And she's like, how did you get over that? And I was like, I was so young that it never even occurred to me that could happen. Like, it was just like, I'm going scuba diving, and this is a thing, and I have to learn what to do. It never even occurred in my mind that all of these things could go wrong, and that I could get seriously injured or damaged, or like, it's dangerous. Like, it was never even a dangerous thing for me. It was just, oh, you're going to learn to scuba dive. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that definitely happens. We're definitely more fearless when we're younger. There's no, I remember going to Disneyland when I was a kid growing up with my brother and sister, and my brother's 4 years younger than me. My sister's 2 years younger than me. And this was very, very young. Not to completely put him on blast. And he was afraid to go on Big Thunder Mountain, which is like on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most intense roller coaster you could be, it's like a negative 0.5.
Yeah, it's like pretty flat.
Right. It's pretty flat. But and my sister and I just like totally made fun of him, because like he was like, no, I don't want to go, I'm afraid. And I used to love roller coasters. And maybe, God, this had to be more than 10 years ago. Probably somewhere around 10 years ago. He's like, hey, you want to go Six Flags? And I'm like, sure. And I used to go to Six Flags all the time. Used to love going on roller coasters. Like I mentioned earlier, like in high school, we went there a few times and like ate acid, and it was like really, really fun. And I'm at Six Flags with my brother, and I wasn't having a good time. There were a couple of roller coasters in particular where I was like, what am I doing? Like, and there was this one roller coaster in particular where you started flat, and instead of like going forward on the track, it like backed you all the way up to the very end of the track, in which you were completely at a 90-degree angle to the ground, and you could hear like it backed all the way up, and then like it locked, and you could hear this like chunk.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just left you there for a minute. And so you're literally, I don't know, how many stories up,
Yeah.
hanging there, looking at the ground. And in my mind, I'm having this classic, like, just classic reaction of seeing my life flash before my eyes and realizing I have too much to live for to be on this roller coaster. What am I doing? And at that very moment, I look over at my brother and he can see it in my eyes and he just starts laughing. And I was like, fuck, man, this is karma right here. Right. And so we go through like the break,
it drops
the catch. Yeah. It drops. We go through the whole thing, which basically takes you all the way to the other end, which is you end up in the same place, but opposite.
Yeah.
So instead of being 90 degrees looking at the ground, you're 90 degrees looking straight up. And then it goes the whole thing in reverse, right? Worst roller coaster experience ever. And we get off and my brother just looks at me and he's like, you want to go again? And I was like, fuck, because I didn't want to go again, but there was no way that my identity as the big brother and like that I was going to like let him get that one over on me, So I was like, okay, fine. And that's karma for you. But yeah, I totally had that moment of like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. It is interesting though too, because like also as a kid, there can be things that you are like irrationally scared of as well. Like I also there was a brief stint in my childhood where I was really scared to go on an airplane, like just absolutely terrified. Cause I remember I saw just, my parents were watching some documentary about a plane that fucking blew up in the middle of, the ocean or whatever for no reason. And then, that traumatized me. I'm like, holy shit, like that could happen. Cause I think beforehand, it didn't even occur to me that could happen. Like, unless you know that something's dangerous, like, I'm sure if somebody would have showed me a scuba diving documentary about somebody getting the bends or whatever, I probably would have been like, I don't know if that's for me. But like, I just wasn't even aware that it could be dangerous. So it's like, fuck it. But I'd still love to scuba dive. I just haven't had the opportunity to in a while. But once you're certified for life. So I'm down to go again sometime soon.
Nice. Is there a lake scuba diving in Denver?
Probably not, to be honest. I think I gotta go to the ocean to do that.
So there was a part so as far as reading the Untethered Soul, I have started reading it from the beginning, but
it's a good place to start.
It is a good place to start, right? But I don't always do that. And especially with like a book like this, where there is so much depth to it. And sometimes I like bounce around from book to book. So there's been a couple of times where I've done this thing, and it's something I started to do actually during ceremonies. Actually, I mean, funny enough, I didn't mean to bring this up, but like the whole reason that this show is called The Vital Point, one of the reasons is during a mushroom ceremony, this book like started like there was like this calling, like I have to look at this book right now. And I literally like opened up to this random page and it was talking about the vital point. So that happens, like that's something that we do during mushroom ceremonies, is like not necessarily like I'm not trying to force it, but if some sort of channeling wants to come through, it will. And some really cool stuff has kind of happened through that. And I wasn't doing that with this, but I did just decide to randomly like pick it up and just open to a particular place. And it was so just like, it was speaking to exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. And I'm going to read it. It says, people don't understand that fear is a thing. It's just another object in the universe that you're capable of experiencing. You can do one of two things with fear. You can recognize that you have it and work to release it,
or you can keep it and try to hide from it. Because people don't deal with fear objectively, they don't understand it. They end up keeping their fear and trying to prevent things from happening that would stimulate it. They go through life attempting to create safety and control by defining how they need life to be in order to be okay. This is how the world becomes frightening. And this whole chapter, which is chapter 8, Let Go Now or Fall, is freaking incredible. So thoughts on that? Any reflections? Anything come up for you?
It's just like, it's one of those like, thank you for being able to put into words something that I am unable to put into words myself and truly understand.
Yeah.
And that's what honestly so much of that book was that like all of these things that I learned and realized from ayahuasca, it helped me put that into words of like what I felt like and how I now was able to perceive the world, but just didn't have the vocabulary to truly be able to relate to somebody else. But like, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, everything is objective. Like, you know, everything's subjective to us, but it's objective in reality. Like I've said this to you before, there's no such thing as good or bad in the world. Everything just is. It's how we view it that determines whether it's going to be good or bad. So there is fear in the world. There are things that can scare you, but whether or not you let that scare, you know, you let that fear control your actions in the future and essentially run your life, that's up to you. You get to decide if you want to do that or not. So if you're scared of roller coasters, you can spend your whole life making sure you don't go on a roller coaster, which is objectively pretty easy to do. Right. They don't pop out of nowhere and make you get on them. Or you could recognize that you're scared of them and do it anyways, and like feel the fear, like feel it while you're experiencing that. And then odds are the fear is probably going to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything just is. Mm-hmm. Everything else is just a layer.
Yeah.
And then maybe a layer on top of that of shame or guilt for being like, why can't I do this?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's the worst of it.
Right. Yeah. I've been watching this documentary on Shaun White, the snowboarder. And, you know, I think that's like a big theme of the documentary is just like watching him go through that process of like constantly having to push further and further and not allow that fear to overtake him and overwhelm him.
Yeah.
You know, and then getting to this place where he could say, you know what, like, I could keep pushing this, but is this a good idea? Yeah. You know, here's these kids that are like rocking my tricks and pushing it even further. And I have to admit that like I'm 35, my body isn't reacting the same way. I don't, I don't rebound from an injury the same way anymore. And I'm not walking away from this because of fear, but just discernment that it's time to go, you know? And not everybody has that discernment, I think. You know, sometimes the fear is what's keeping you in a certain situation, right?
Or the fear of the unknown.
Yeah. It's a good thing to travel, and it's a good thing to go and experience other cultures, you know, because it's like, I think that's one thing that it shows is just how much you've created your own reality and like your own sort of little bubble, and that there's vastly different worlds and realities outside of that thing that you grew up with. And, you know, it's cool to just like learn and be like, oh, this is different, you know, what's this like? So yeah, just curiosity.
I agree.
Well, I think we're in one of those situations like we were on your podcast where it's like, man, we could just keep going and going and going. But I want to be respectful of your time. And so as far as, you know, we mentioned the vital point being the one of the esoteric sort of sources of calling the show The Vital Point. Another one was just this idea that, in terms of these different transformational practices, whether it's meditation or psychedelics, breath work, different therapeutic modalities, the method that you're using isn't as important as just following it and practicing, right? And that we don't get the same benefit from practicing as we do, or from reading or listening as we do from practicing. So that's been my vital point, is, you got to practice.
Yeah.
Is there something that's alive to you in this moment? Maybe just in general in your life right now, or through this conversation, that stands out as a vital point?
I don't know if right now specifically I can do, but I mean, I think this probably does tie into that, but like the idea and of just being, of just existing, and again realizing that there's nothing we need to do beyond existing. And then that ties back into just being means that you're living in the present moment and you're just accepting what is and just doing that. That's it. So like just be, man. That's it. So it's kind of the opposite of Nike.
You are enough.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, there's something in that's bringing up of like, from The Alchemist. Have you read that book?
I've not. I know.
So like
to.
in the Alchemist, he has this like dream about this treasure, and he basically goes on this journey, through multiple countries and whatever, looking for this treasure, and all these different things happen to him, and growth, and it's very much like, there's some similarities, I think, to the book Siddhartha, in terms of like just the different stages that he gets to, and like he has the opportunity to like settle down with a woman that he's really comfortable with, and he would totally be happy on one level doing that, and she's like, hey, like, don't give up on your dream for comfort, right? But in the end, the treasure is right back where he started. But he had to go through that whole journey to like, he couldn't just have been like, oh shoot, there's the treasure, right? Like, and so to me, there's something about just being within that. Like, it's like we kind of go on these quote unquote healing, journeys through working with psychedelics, and it's less of like what we have to change and more just accepting fully who we are.
Yeah. Accepting what is already right there. And like, it's about the journey. It's not about the destination. Like, that's so fucking true. Like, yes, I am trying to, again, with you and me, like, we're trying to grow this podcast. We're trying to do these things, but like, if we're not having fun along the journey, we're not going to have fun once we get to the destination either. So, how do we tie it back to how do I have fun and how do I enjoy existing right now in this present moment? And that's going to inform how I make the next step, what I do from here.
And to definitely tie it back to the very beginning, one way that you can really begin to build that awareness and that appreciation is learning just how to focus on the breath. And as you do that, some of the noise starts to settle. The podcast I did yesterday with Michael Cammers, we were talking about this idea of a snow globe and like shaking the snow globe up. And you can't just hand somebody the snow globe and say, stop all this, right? But if you leave it alone and you quit shaking it, eventually the snow is going to start to settle. And some of the confusion will change to clarity. and we start to see those layers we're painting on, or those narratives that we're adding, the shame and guilt and stories and excuses and fears, and we can let go of them a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Well, Cam, this has been a amazing journey. I really appreciate you being here. Where should people go to connect with you if they want to learn more?
Go to on Instagram. I am at tripsitting.blog. Also on TikTok as well, but I'll be honest, I just post the same videos from Instagram as I do on TikTok. And then also to my website is just tripsitting.blog. And I also have a newsletter called Trippy Mondays, where I go over just 3 things from the past week that caught my attention, that I learned from or noticed. Just kind of some interesting little tidbits that I do. And then also subscribe to Shroomtown, which is on Substack, and that's underground psychedelic related news between me and Sophie, as we talked about a little bit earlier. Just a little project that we're working on.
Yeah, I've been digging that one a lot.
Oh yeah. But thank you so much for having me, man. This was phenomenal. I'm really honestly honored that you invited me to come onto your podcast as well. And I'm really grateful to meet you, grateful to know you, and grateful to be here.
Oh man, the feeling is mutual, brother, and it's been really nice getting to know you and getting to hang out for a few minutes at the conference. And yeah, I'm just really honored that you would ask me to be on your podcast as well. So, it's like, I think it's funny because it's like, I guess the more that I do podcasting, the more I realize that like how many podcasts there are. So it is cool. Like, it's like out of all the people, you're like, oh, you want to talk to me? That's pretty sweet. Like, thanks,
It is. Yeah. This is only maybe the second or third time that I'm a guest on somebody else's. And
oh, nice.
It really is an honor. Like I get that I have mine and I invite people, and like, I might invite other podcasters, but at no point, if I'm inviting a podcaster on mine, do I ever expect them to also extend me the invitation to be on theirs too. Like, this is, because I wouldn't expect the same thing either. If we vibe and we kind of mesh together, then absolutely. But it's cool that somebody wants to hear from me, and I'm sure you feel the same when you're on another podcast too.
Yeah, and I mean, you really teed up such a great topic to talk about in terms of the book recommendation. Like I said, it was one of those things where it just got to the point where I couldn't ignore it. I mean, I guess I could have.
But the universe is just telling you otherwise.
And it's still coming up. Like literally last week, I was with a client and they were like, I feel like this blah, blah, blah from the Untethered Soul. And I was like, what is like literally 6 months ago, I had no idea that this book existed. And now it just seems like it's everywhere popping up. So, I don't know. I guess I've just learned to pay attention, to those things, because I don't really believe in coincidences anymore.
Nope.
And just, it was like a cool thing that continued to pop up. And so, yeah, in terms of having a podcast with you, it was seemed like a no-brainer.
Hell yeah.
and also to say thank you for the introduction and for being the first catalyst to bring that into my consciousness.
No problem, man. Always happy to. And yeah, well, I can't imagine this is going to be the last time we talk soon. So, until we talk again, I've got your phone number.
That's right. Yeah. We can fuck around and have more fun together.
Exactly. I love you, brother.
So hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as we had fun fucking around and doing it. And definitely would recommend the Untethered Soul. I'm going to pay that one forward, and maybe even if you don't decide to buy it, you'll start seeing it in your reality now 6 or 7 times.
Yep.
Until you buy it. And, just like anything else, the important thing is to practice. So find something that relates, that you resonate with, that seems interesting, and give it a try. As David Nichtern is fond of saying, words don't cook rice. So find a recipe and then go out and cook it, because that's the vital point. See you guys next time.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it inspired you to not take life so seriously and really have fun from an authentic place, or maybe to pick up the book, The Untethered Soul. It's been pretty transformative for me and for Cam, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you found value and inspiration in the episode, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment and leave a review. It's a simple, cost-free way to support the show and help more like-minded people discover it. That's the way the algorithms work. Also, make sure that you sign up for the free Breathwork for Transformation workshop that I'm doing on November 19th. You can find the link to sign up in the show page on the platform that you are consuming this podcast on, or go to lu.ma/Blue Magic Alchemy and look for the free Breathwork workshop on November 19th. That's lu.ma/Blue Magic Alchemy and look for the free Breathwork workshop on November 19th. It's going to be a wonderful introduction to breathwork. I really hope that you can join us. Remember, it's not about the method you choose or the pace at which you're traveling. The vital point is to consistently show up for yourself and practice, to hold on to that vision and that faith of what you experienced in the medicine space, in your inner work, when you connect with your higher self, and really just continue to move towards that with vision and authenticity and joy. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and above all, keep practicing, because that's the vital point.